This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Thanks for coming back, everybody. Thank you for participating so well this morning. And I'm looking forward to the next session. My name is Emma Wilson. I work on extractive industries at the International Institute for Environment and Development. Unfortunately, my colleague Abby Buxton will be with us today. She works a lot on mining. I work more on the oil and gas side. Abby completed a review of the Minerals Mining and Sustainable Development Project, which some of you may know IAD played a key role in about a decade ago. And that project highlighted lots of key issues of mining and sustainable development. And Abby completed a review of that MMSD+10 recently. Abby's now on maternity leave, and so I'd like to just make a couple of reflections on that paper. What struck me particularly was the reviewers, the people who participated in the review, were saying that one of the things about mining and sustainable development is that awareness about sustainable development has increased dramatically. There's considerable good practice that people are able to demonstrate now. But in many cases, it's the implementation of principles and standards throughout mining chains, and that is the key challenge. And so in a sense, it's the next challenge is moving from knowledge and awareness to implementation throughout the industry. Another key finding was related to social issues. People are saying that social issues are now some of the key challenges in the mining industry. With many environmental issues, technological challenges have been met with technology. Although that's not entirely the case. But social issues and questions such as free, prior and informed consent are now becoming areas that people are attending to very, very closely. And a third key finding is the need to focus on small-scale mining, informal mining. And it's good to see this special edition on small-scale gold mining in Peru. And IAD is certainly looking to explore small-scale mining much more. So given that kind of background, it's very good to have on this in this session on minimising the detrimental impacts. It's good to have a great range of speakers. Hugh, Elliott from Anglo-American is going to speak about some innovative work of Anglo-American in Peru. Unfortunately, Vasquez can't be with us, but Carlos is going to stand in again, and I'm looking forward to hearing about human rights issues and community issues. And then Jessica Buds is going to talk about water resources, which is possibly one of the big hot topics on the environmental agenda that is emerging at the moment. So what we're going to do is about 15 minutes for each speaker, followed by 5 minutes question and answer, and then a discussion of hopefully about 25 minutes before lunch. And I'll introduce each speaker before they speak. And can everybody hear okay? Did you hear okay this morning? We don't have microphones, but if you do have any problems hearing at any point, please just stick your hand up and go something like that, and I'll try and sort of make the speaker speak up a little bit. So first of all, we're delighted to welcome Hugh Elliott, who is Head of Government Relations at Anglo-American. This, for those who don't know, is a global mining company with operations primarily in Southern Africa, the Americas and Australia. Hugh came to Anglo-American in 2006, and he's designed and built up the government relations function across the company. He previously served at the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London and overseas. Overseas postings included Madrid, Buenos Aires and Paris, and he's returning to the FCO as Director for Engagement and Communication in April this year. Hugh was Chairman of Planning House UK Centre for North America from 2009 to 2012. So Hugh.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. As Emma said, please do tell me if you can't hear me. I'll try and speak up. Before I start, and I just wanted to ask a quick question: was how many people are in the room who are representatives of mining companies? Just for curiosity. Don't be ashamed. Just say.
Met with. Sorry.
Representatives of mining companies.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So we're sort of in a very small number. And I didn't know the answer to that question before I asked it, but I think it's slightly indicative of a problem that we have in the mining sector, which is that we need to get out and about a bit more. And we try to do that in Anglo America, but we don't always succeed, and it's not always easy. But it is, I think we have one problem that the mining industry faces illustrated through that answer. I'm going to talk about start off by giving some general observations about the mining industry, very, very briefly, a little bit of context, and maybe touching on one or two of the issues which have been raised already this morning. Then I'm going to focus on a project I'm very familiar with, which is a large copper project in the south of Peru, called the Quellaveco project in the department of Moquegua, which I was quite closely involved with. And then I'm going to try to go a little bit and take a view from inside the mining company about how a mining company approaches some of the issues and the challenges that we see, and try and how a mining company actually works. Because one of the things that I really found striking when I first came to Anglo American, and in my time in Anglo American, nearly 7 years now in the company, was how little knowledge. The company may not be brilliant at understanding the world outside its borders, but I think the world outside the company is even worse potentially at understanding how companies actually work and take decisions. And if many people will be wanting to influence how companies actually operate, and helping them understand how companies think, how companies structure and organize is really important to be able to do that, I would argue. And then I'll just give one or two final reflections on what success may look like for a mining company in the future. So, just a couple of introductory comments. This is the cover of our sustainability report from 2011. The 2012 one will come out soon, and will doubtless have a nice pretty picture on the front, but I just wanted to say that although we're not talking about it today, we in the mining industry do recognise that there is a potential inherent contradiction in terms about mining a sustainability and mining a finite resource with just one planet, and if you discount the not very desirable option of additions to the mineral resource on Earth through meteor strikes, we've probably just got the one resource for the time being. And we do recognise that what sustainability, the whole issue around the very, very long term, as Tony was referring to earlier, is an issue. That said, so we are very alert, for example, in the industry to issues like substitution, to issues like recycling. But for example, recycling is a very, very different kind of business to large-scale mining. So in general, you will not find a large-scale mining company involved also in something like recycling. But just to put it up there that this is something that we do occasionally think about. Second, we're not under any illusions about how people think about us, okay? And after 7 years in the industry, I can promise I'm under no illusions whatsoever. So, you know, this is a couple of years old, I like to think we might have gone up a bit, or at least bankers gone down a bit by now, so the relative position might have adjusted. But we understand that in general, we don't have a high reputation and we are not trusted. In general, that's true. It's interesting that it's improving. The perceptions are improving, and I think that has actually quite a lot to do with initiatives such as the MMSD initiative and the subsequent establishment of the mining industry has an industry body called the International Council on Mining and Metals, ICMM.org, if you're interested, which if you go and have a little flick through that website, you'll get an idea of some of the issues that, and it's purely about an industry grouping around sustainability, you'll get an idea of some of the ways in which the mining industry is approaching some of the key sustainability challenges that we face. So that's just a couple of general words. Now just straight into Quellaveco. Quellaveco is a project in the department of Moquegua in the south of Peru. So between Quellaveco, between Moquegua and Chile, you just have the department of Tacna. It's a very, very dry region. This is what it looks like. Just a couple of pictures to show you. Those tracks there are the exploration roads which have been put in there for the exploration drilling. And you can see, if you look down the bottom right, you can see a narrow river, which is a very important part of this story. And what I'm going to tell you now is a very, very summary story of a process of potential conflict which then turned into dialogue over a period of 18 months or so in 2011 and 2012 around this project. So inevitably this is going to be so brief as to risk being a bit of a caricature of what went on. I'm happy to answer any questions as to any of the details or issues you're interested in, but what I'm going to try and do is give you a flavour for what happened, and no more. So, again, this is a picture, this is what the land looks like. That's the river downstream from the Quellaveco project, and you can see that that river is really very much the lifeblood of the region. It is a semi-desert region in the south of Peru. Anybody who's been there knows very well, and water, which we'll hear more about a bit later, is absolutely a critical issue. This is the town of Moquegua, the regional capital, about 70,000 population, and you can see a road running across the middle of the picture, and just in front of that road is the river. And the reason you can't see any water there is because this is the dry season. The dry season is most of the year. There's a rainy season in January and February, when actually there is often excess water, but most of the year there is. I mean, the river does still run, but it's pretty dry, and it's not a big, wide river by any means. Water's a major issue. So just some facts. I'm not going to give lots of screens of lots of text, but just so you know what it is we're talking about here. This is a copper project. So we want to turn that hill into a hole, basically, into a large-scale copper mine. We bought into this project in 1992. And for various reasons, which I don't have time to go into, it has come and gone in terms of whether we would or wouldn't develop it, and there have been various plans put forward to do so. We finally decided we did want to take this forward in 2010, and you're going to hear what happened. This is a crucial slide for understanding the core issue of Quellaveco. I mean, there are lots of issues. I don't want to oversimplify, but if you want a core issue, it's water. And you can see that the river basin towards the middle bottom of that slide is a small river basin in Moquegua, going down to the town of Moquegua, I mean. And there's a much bigger river basin, which is the Tambo River Basin, which crosses the border between Moquegua and Arequipa provinces. You can see it goes out into the Pacific in Arequipa province. In order to have water for mining, we needed to take water from the Tambo river basin through to the river basin in Moquegua. There are all sorts of water schemes already in place, public water schemes, to do the same for agricultural and human use, because as I was saying, it's a dry area. Now, so water permits become very important. For those of you who don't know this gentleman, he's Neville Chamberlain. He was a British Prime Minister, and he is waving a piece of paper from 1938 saying peace for our time, which was not an auspicious thing to say in 1938, as it turned out. Similarly, we obtained a crucial water permit. I apologize, it's not a use permit, it's a water availability permit in August 2010. And we were very pleased about this. So for Mr. Chamberlain, read Anglo-American. We were very happy that we had our water availability permit granted to us. Unfortunately, 2 days later, we had slightly underestimated the degree to which the local communities felt differently to us, and there was a very major demonstration against the company, and unfortunately what happened just a couple of days later was that the central government cancelled our permit, and that's how we felt then. Now, that, as you can imagine, prompted a certain amount of debate and discussion in the company. What had gone wrong? Why didn't we understand what was likely to happen? And in fact, we had done a huge amount of very good work in the past, over many of the years in the past, nearly 20 years since we brought into the in terms of understanding local communities all through the Moquegua area and beyond. But Obviously, we got that a little bit wrong. Why did we get it wrong in 2010? Probably because we had started to focus on building the project, and we brought in a lot of people whose job it was to build the project, and they were spending a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about the company, and not enough time thinking about what I'm going to call the outside world. In other words, the world we actually live in and operate in and have to interact with. So we went into a multi-stakeholder dialogue table process, and that's what this story is about. The way it came about was, normally if you have your water permit cancelled, then you'll go and lobby the government. Excuse me. And you'll try and say, please could you give us our water permit back? We've fulfilled all the conditions to have our water permit. And so why are you cancelling it? And our lawyers would get onto the case, and we'd really, really work hard to try and get that permit back. What happened was that, in fact, our CEO flew out to Peru and met with the regional president, a chap called Martin Vizcarra, who'd been elected regional president in September, I think, 2010, and was due to take office in January 2011. And he said, there's no point you're going ahead, they won't let you. If you want to do anything here, you're going to have to sit down and talk to people about it. And he proposed to set up a dialogue table, which he began to work on in the beginning of 2011. Now, what the very interesting thing about this dialogue table was first of all, that they don't have, as I think was mentioned earlier today, dialogue tables don't have a fantastic reputation in Peru. They tend to have a history of spending a lot of time talking and not much time coming to a conclusion, and if they do, it probably doesn't actually address the problem they were set up to address in the first place. So those people in our Peruvian office who first heard of the idea that we should sit down to a dialogue table said, don't touch it with a barge pole. Now this would be absolutely awful thing to do. First of all, you're going to lose any control over the process, and secondly, they never work anyway. That was one reaction. But another reaction was, well, where are we? We stopped and we looked and we decided, where are we in this project and what do we need to do in terms of understanding what would make an acceptable project locally. And in the end, our CEO did decide that we would stop the project, press the pause button on the project, despite the fact that it cost millions of dollars a month to do so, by the way, and go into a process which I'm now going to describe very, very quickly. Around the dialogue table, there were a very large number of different organisations. It started off with about 60 and ended up with 31. Not every organisation was there at every meeting, but there was always a quorum. And a quorum was, I think, 2/3 of the members at any one time. And who were these people? They were representatives of local municipalities, town councils, farmers' organisations, water users' organisations, local defence fronts, informal, that's to say illegal water users associations, the College of Lawyers, the College of Engineers, anyway, there's a whole host of different community interests that were actually represented around this table by the end of the process, including organisations that were viscerally, and some that remain, viscerally opposed to the project. Okay? But what was interesting over the course of 18 months, and a lot of stakeholder engagement by us. I've just put this up there because I like this picture of the alpaca that I took when I was up in the highlands there in the Andes. But that is what that's meant to be a symbol of, is the fact you have to understand who all your stakeholders are as a company. One of the things that we hadn't done enough was to listen properly to what was actually going on, to what people really felt, and to what people really wanted or didn't want in terms of a mining project. And the other thing we hadn't done is we hadn't begun to explain enough to people what the project actually consisted of and how it put at risk or didn't put at risk things that they cared about. And mostly, and I'm simplifying horribly here, but the single most important thing that people cared about was water. It was to have their water. So a lot of this process was explaining, understanding, listening and engaging, and after a long process of doing this, and after the dialogue table had met many times and subcommittee had met many times, community representatives had chosen their specialist experts to review our water studies to see if there really was water available for the project, and we made a series of commitments around that, what we would and wouldn't do with the water that I don't have time to go into in detail now. We got our water use permit back in July 2011, which was great, and we were very happy again. Now, what was happening as well in July 2011 is that Peruvian politics were changing. Ollanta was becoming president, and we actually did go and see and talk to Ollanta, his then Prime Minister, and his mines minister of the time, to explain what we were doing. But unfortunately what then happened in August was that our water availability permit was suspended again. And we actually felt rather worse than that picture now, because we've been doing this for nearly a year and we hadn't seemed to make any progress. And I certainly was getting a lot of questions from London saying, you must have been crazy to go into this dialogue table process, look what's happened, you're just not getting anywhere at all. But what we were actually making progress, because through an awful lot of different meetings and different engagements and different substantial commitments that the company then had to make, which I'll mention briefly, very, very briefly in a moment, we did in the end get approval from the dialogue table. This is no formal approval. There's no law that says the dialogue table has to give you approval for you to get your water availability license. That doesn't exist. But what happened was, because the dialogue table said they were happy with what we were proposing in the end, having adjusted a series of things, the government felt comfortable to give us the permit. And that's a crucial thing, I think, that we as companies have to understand. We have to understand that the formal permitting process and the informal license to operate have now merged. They are now indistinguishable, very often in many jurisdictions for us as companies. So just a very brief summary of some of the undertakings that we made. We doubled the size of a major dam that we were building to provide water for the mine, so that that dam also provides water for agricultural use and for expansion of the frontera, of the agricultural frontier, land available for agricultural use. We made major changes to our mine closure plan. I'll mention that in a second because it's an important issue. And then there was a lot of talk this morning, which perhaps in Q&A we can go into a bit more, around local hire, local training, supplier and enterprise development initiatives. In other words, how we actually deliver longer-term benefit. And there was joint monitoring, which was important because nobody, remember the trust point, we weren't believed. So the important thing we had to establish was structures so that other people could go, who were believed, could come along and see what we were doing and see for themselves. Final meeting of the dialogue table, the Peruvian administration played quite an important role here, not only the regional president, but the national ministries of environment, ministers of environment and mines are sitting at the end of the table there, and the National Ministry of Mines, through its social conflict office, played a crucial role in facilitating the final processes of the dialogue table. Just to give you a couple of numbers of the dialogue table, there were over 20 meetings of the plenary and over 50 meetings of subcommittees there. This was a long, drawn-out process with experts brought in at different times to scrutinise different aspects of the project. 1 minute on this. This is what we had planned for the mine to look like when we finished. We planned for the river to fill up the pit, and the dotted line you can see there is a tunnel. It's a diversion, river diversion, because on the left of the picture, that brown chunk is a waste rock pile, which is sitting in the river valley, where the river valley is today. When we took people, although this is a very good solution, this is a very good end-of-mine solution, the engineers say, and I believe them because they're very, very competent, and I genuinely do believe them. That's not meant to be a flippant comment. But whenever we took people up to look at the mine, and we explained this is what it was going to be, they hated it, because they wanted the river back where it was. So that's what it's now going to be. And that was with the river going back, will refill the pit, the river will go back into its original cauce, stream, valley. And that was something that a year before we decided to do it, we as a company were absolutely sure we were never going to do. And in some other projects we might not have been able to do it because it might have been too expensive, but this project could just about financially carry that commitment to be able to put the river back where it was. This isn't actually a technical issue, this was an emotional issue for people that we just hadn't understood really mattered to them. But having been out there many times myself, standing up above where the that pit is going to be, and looking at people's faces as we talk them through what our final closure plan was, once you've done that a lot as a company, you understand you have to approach these things in a slightly different way. So that's where we are today, 24 meetings, 50 subcommittee meetings. Now, what we have here, the last bullet point there, is a license to start. What we recognise is that we haven't got a license to do everything. We've got a license to start, and our social license is something that we we earn every day. Now, one thing we learned from this is that industry initiatives are necessary, and I mentioned the ICMM principles towards sustainability, and I'm not, this will be available for you to look at afterwards, and it will be available on the website. But what's most important, our conclusion, is that there is business to be made in being the best at sustainability. We were held up in Peru as an example of potentially responsible mining that could deliver social inclusion and environmental protection. Now, as I say, we only have a license to start. We haven't got there yet. We are cautious. But we believe that there's actual business to be made if we can be seen as being a company that can actually manage all these complex trends and tendencies in a way that prevents conflict. And I don't have time to go into this slide, but it's a crucial one. As I mentioned, I said I was going to talk about what it looks like from within the company. From within the company, you have to get your structures and your processes right. And they have to be ones that you can actually apply on the ground. Very often I thought people will say, well, how do you actually manage your relationships with the communities? Is it all very ad hoc? Is it sort of, you just go out and talk to people from time to time? I mean, if you're interested, and I'll leave this out here, this is the manual. This is the socio-economic assessment toolbox that all our operations and now increasingly our projects have to understand all the different complexities and aspects around our social interactions of our projects and our operations. I'll leave it on the table there so you can flick through and have a look, and it's also available online. But it's a chunky thing, so it's easier to do in hard copy. There's a lot of detailed knowledge and expertise that goes on in there, and you can see, and as I say, I can't go into all of these things, but one thing I am going to say is that we seek to leverage our core business, and I'm nearly there. We talked earlier, we heard it earlier about taxes. The yellow pie, this pie is our value distribution. Look on it as our turnover, if you like, as a company. So 29 billion in 2011. Now, nearly half of that is taken up from our supply chain. So we were looking earlier at the yellow part, which was taxes. Now that part isn't a percentage of profit. Our effective tax rate in terms of profit, and we publish our tax rate, and we publish our taxes paid to governments around the world, is just over 30, was just over I think 31% last year. But so that chunk is a chunk of turnover, which is different. So if you're looking at how you can maximize and optimize the development impact, and I use this in a not in a developing a mine sense, but in development in terms of promoting local development, local, regional, national development, look at the blue area in particular, and look at the red area, employees. Can you get local hire? How can you improve local hire? How can you improve local procurement? And we understand that as a company, and we're putting quite a lot of effort now into developing systems globally to make sure we get much, much better at doing those things that were referred to earlier this morning. I don't have time to go into it in detail, but I can talk more about it if you're interested. And finally, I would just say that, and this is my final slide, this is just a quote from the Financial Times that was talking about the problems in South Africa at the end of last year in the platinum industry, which is also part of our business, although those troubles weren't particularly around our mines. But this statement, I think, is absolutely right. What's happened is the formal power and the informal power has transformed. And I believe that successful companies are going to be ones that understand that fragmentation of power and develop the capacity to listen, engage, and respond to the very, very diverse sources and centres of power that have emerged. So thank you very much.